Hello everyone, welcome to another tutorial. Today we're going to be making a mother of pearl slab and some pearl beads. Just before I get into what we need, if you hear chirping in the background, that's just because in my incubator a bunch of baby chickens just hatched and they just happen to be in the room right next to me. So ignore that. Anyways, what we're going to need today is some head pins. This will just be for when we make our beads to put the holes in them. We're going to use some mica powders. And this is specifically interference powders. So I'll put the link for these down below, but they're pearl. They have a pearl sheen, but they change color depending on the light. So I'm using violet, pink, green, and blue. Then I'm gonna have some Sculpey Premo translucent, Sculpey Premo white, a ball stylus, rather large, but really you can work with anything that just kind of has a rounded end. My tissue blade, my clay roller. I also have my bigger roller, my Atlas 150 that I'm going to be using. So yeah, let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is color my clay. Now you may be wondering, oh, you're doing a pearl tutorial. Why aren't you just using, the pearl color of the Sculpey set? I don't like it. I think it's not as realistic as the technique that I'm going to show you today. It just feels a bit more glittery than what I'd like to do. So instead I'm going to do this. And you may be wondering, oh, then why don't you just use pure white? I like to use the translucent clay because it adds a sort of more realistic quality to the final piece. So yeah, personal preference. You could probably do this technique with white as well and it would still work, but my preference is to do it with translucent. But I am going to use this white to dye this translucent clay. So I might not necessarily use all of this. I kind of just take a little bit at a time, and I'm going to mix it into this by rolling it through my clay roller, and then I'll see where that gets me. My goal is to get this to be sort of an off-white color. I'm going to go ahead and mix this, adding white until I get to that color, and then I'll show you what that final color looks like. So there we go. That's kind of the level of white that I want it to be. And just to compare, here's what like pure white looks like. So it's like an off-white, sort of creamy white color. And that's exactly what I'm going for today. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to cut it in half. So half of this I'm going to use as the base and half of it I'm going to use to drape over and create this sort of pearl effect. So this one's a little bit smaller, so I'm going to use this one for the base. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll this out a bit thinner. Right now this is the thickness of 0 on my Atlas 150. So I'm going to roll this out to a number 3, just because since you're doubling it up, we don't need it to be that thick. Okay, so that's what I'm gonna do right now. I'm trying to get it nice and square before I roll it through so that I have a nice sort of slab to work off of. Okay, so I'm actually gonna go ahead and put this on this tile, which is what I'm going to bake it on. That way I don't have to move it again after. This is just sort of like a porcelain tile. So this is what I have. I trimmed it a little bit so that it's a nice sort of uniform shape. I'm just gonna lay it flat on here, making sure there's no air bubbles or anything. You can even take your acrylic roller and just do a roll over it just really gently because we don't want to stretch it out anymore. Okay. Now with the other half, we're gonna roll this out quite thin. I'm probably gonna go to a number 6, potentially higher if I can get it higher without it splitting. This is the piece that we're going to drape to create this sort of pearl texture on our slab here. So I'm going to start by, there's an air bubble here. You really want to make sure there's no air bubbles if you can help it. So I'm going to roll this through starting at a 4 just to get it thin, then I'm going to bump it up to a 6, and if I can get it a little bit higher I might try to. But 6 is probably enough. You want it to be big enough that it can kind of overlap this piece so that we have room to sort of do the draping across this slab. So I'm going to go do that. So here's what it looks like after rolling through a 6. You You can see these little lines. I don't know if your clay rollers do this, mine sometimes does. So what I'm gonna do just to get rid of that is just lay this down here and roll over it just gently with this until those lines sort of smooth out. And it won't take that much to get them to go away. But since this is the part we're gonna see more, we really wanna make sure this is nice and smooth. And it's okay if that makes this a little bit thinner as well, because this is not our base. Okay, so now we have this piece. What we're going to do is, starting at the top, we're gonna kind of use our thumbs to put it on in sort of this way. So what I like to do is sort of press the top down so that you've got something to work with there. Oops. And then I work from the bottom, just sort of poking my fingers and the thumbs underneath to make sort of like this rough draping. I'm trying not to make any ridges that are too big, but I also don't want there to be too many gaps either. So this definitely is a technique that takes some practice, and you have to be careful about it sticking. It's just you know, this takes some time to sort of play around with. So you just keep working your way down the slab. Some people are very good at this. I don't know that I am, but I have it at a functional level. Okay, so something like that works. Then you can just take your tissue blade and we're just gonna cut off the excess that we have. Cut off there, just so we have a nice clean shape to work with here. Now we're going to go in with our ball stylus, and we're basically just gonna make indents across this all over the place. This is just, it looks kind of silly right now, but once you start cutting into your pieces and you just see all of like the dimension and the lines that are in there, it looks really cool, I promise you. So I'm trying not to keep them too uniform, rolling it around and kind of just making sure there's no area that's kind of too smooth. Pushing down on the ridges so that there's nothing that's standing up too much. And yeah, going like this. I just find this adds a really cool effect to pearl pieces, because it just makes it look like a raw, found in the ocean sort of pearl, which I enjoy. Okay, so when it looks sort of like that, we can leave it alone. Now is where the magic happens. So we're going to grab our color shifting pearl pigments, and the scraps we are going to use, so we're just going to roll that up and put it aside. Oh my gosh, I forgot another tool we're going to need. Guys, I'm all over the place today. You're also going to need a paintbrush to apply this onto here, okay? Hopefully I didn't forget anything else. There will be a full supplies list in the description of this video to make up for my lack of remembering at the beginning of this video. Okay, let me get my paintbrush. So this is the paintbrush I'm going to be using. A bigger one would be ideal, but my daughter got into my paintbrushes and destroyed them all, and I haven't got a new one yet. So this is what we're working with tonight. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to go color by color, and you're just sort of going to dab it around here, trying not to leave any marks or damage the ridges that we. We're just gonna kind of go like this. We're not gonna cover it entirely with any one color. We're going to go with all of the colors all over it in different places. That's gonna, this is gonna be what's gonna give it that cool rainbow pearl effect. Mother of pearl, I guess they call it, but I think it looks like a rainbow, which is great for Pride Month too, guys. Pearl is the birthstone of June, but I'm also doing like a rainbow pearl, which is like Pride. We're covering all our bases here. So I started with the green one, and I'm just sort of dabbing all over the place. doesn't really matter if you put too much on either, because you can just sort of blow the excess off. So I've got the violet now. Just like the only important thing is that by the end of this, you have the whole thing covered with all of the colors you have. Now you can also do this technique just using just sort of a standard non-color shifting pearl mica powder, like just a standard pearl. It will still look cool, still look pearly, you won't have that rainbow sort of cool effect. And I just wanted to do the rainbow one, that's what I was feeling like. Okay, so I have the whole thing covered now. I'll see if you can, oh, you can totally see in this light. See that a rainbow shimmer when it hits the light? So straight on, it's pretty subtle. It's just sort of like a pearl effect, but as soon as you get different angles, you really see that rainbow effect, which is so fun. So this is ready to be cut into now, but before I do that, we're going to use the scrappy bits from the side to make some beads. You can use clay rollers to make beads, but for this, I really want to make some cool organic shapes. So because of that, I'm not going to use clay rollers at all. I'm just going to do it all by hand, and I'll show you how to make, I think, 4 different types of beads, if I'm remembering right. Yeah, 4. So let's do that. I'm just going to push this aside, and then we'll do that. Okay, so these are the 4 different bead shapes we're going to be making. We'll make sort of just like a raw pearl ball, so it's not going to be uniform, and that is the point. A larger oval bead, this sort of elongated, almost like coral piece looking bead, except that it's going to be for pearl, and a very small chip bead. So let's start with the circle because that's the easiest. You're just going to take a section off of here, however big you want. You can do small circles, big circles, whatever you want, depends on the design. Then you're going to take it, and first you're just going to roll it so that there are no lines anywhere on it. We don't want there to be any visible seam. And once you reach that point, then you just kind of want to press it all over so we get these kind of ridges, so that it's almost like a very rough, faceted circle, like that. So that's how you do the circle one. Very easy. I mean, they're all very easy to do. For the bigger one, you take a bigger piece off, and again, same technique where we're just going to squish it together until we have no lines. When I say lines, this is what I'm talking about. We don't want any of this, so we're just going to keep molding it in our fingers until you get rid of any lines of that nature. Then we're going to shape it into the oval, and this is important. We don't want it just to be flat on the table doing this, because if we do, then one side's going to be perfectly flat, which we don't want. We want both sides to kind of be a little bit on the rougher side. So that's why I'm holding it in my hands. And I'm not trying to make these beads uniform. I'm trying to make them organic and similar to one another, but different as well, because that will just feed further into that organic look. And with this one, I could even take this and just do a couple lines like that, just to further, or dabs, just to further give it some texture. If I lay it flat, I just gotta make sure I do it on both sides until we have a cool stone, something like that. For that bigger shape, for this one, we take some and we're just gonna roll it out like this first. Again, checking for lines. And then you're gonna take both ends and sort of squish them down towards each other so that we get this sort of rectangle. And then once you have that shape, we're just gonna take it and press down a little bit, flipping it over so that we have that texture on both sides. So we have sort of a shape like that. So the final one is the chip bead, which is the hardest one to make. And when I say chip bead, this is what I'm talking about, right? They're all totally different from each other. So I'm gonna try to make this piece a lot more angular, and I want them all to be very different from each other. So that's why this one's a bit more difficult to do. So we start the same way, just by getting a small piece of clay off, rolling it to make sure there's no edges, and then I'm just gonna kind of pinch it in different spots, not overdoing it until I have sort of like a rough shape that's not too rounded, but not too faceted either. So kind of like that. I'll do another one just to show you how to make them different. You know, so it's not, I'm really not trying to make them the same here. And it's a fine touch between making it sort of random and making it be like, oh, this is a triangle or this is a circle. So kind of like that. Now, you can drill holes in these after you bake them if you want. I prefer to do it before baking because I'm not drilling holes down here. I'm going through them lengthways, and that's just a lot trickier to do after they've been baked. But if I were to do that right now with them like this, they would probably lose a lot of their shape. So what I do is I take my beads and I just pop them in the freezer for like 5 to 10 minutes. That's just gonna get them a bit harder so that when I use this to poke through them, it's gonna help them keep their shape a bit more. So I'm gonna use this and make some more beads out of it, and then I'm gonna take all those beads and put them in the freezer, and then I'll show you how we add the pearl effect and this. All right, so I put those beads in the freezer for 10 minutes or so. So while I wait for that, I'm gonna cut into this slab. Because I am trying to make this as organic as possible, I'm using pretty organic shapes. You can use whatever you want, but I just wanted to show you guys something that we want to try to fix before we bake that will happen in designs like this. So let me cut my pieces and then I will show you what I mean. But you're gonna see once you start cutting the pieces just like how cool this effect is. Like it looks completely different once you start cutting into it. Just such cool textured pieces. Okay, so let me just pull this off. It is not going to be a clean pull. Not bad, considering how much is going on here. Look at that, guys. What? That was so much cleaner than I thought it was going to be. Oops, there's clay on my finger. See how there's a little gap there because it was cut on a ridge? Oh my God, focus on it. This one. There's a little hole there. Any pieces that have that, you're gonna go and examine the edges of all these, and any pieces where it has a sort of like hollow cave, we're gonna correct that before we bake. Oh, there's one right there. Focus. See, like here, there's a little hole. So we don't want to have hollow holes on the edges of our pieces. It just doesn't look clean. So what I do to fix that is you can either try to apply a tiny bit of clay, or you can go in with this tool again and just sort of press down just a little bit. Not enough to change the shape, but just enough to sort of fill those holes so that it's nice and solid. So, the hole is gone. So there was a hole there. Now it is no longer. So I'm just gonna go and examine the edges of my pieces and do that with this. If your tool is too big, you can use your fingers, you can use whatever. Just the important part is that you're not manipulating the shape of all these beautiful pieces you've just cut. Okay, and I got these out of the freezer. So it's important to know what direction you want your holes to go into, because you kind of have to work a little bit fast once you take them out of the freezer, because they do thaw pretty quickly. So once you know what direction your holes are going to be, you just take your eye pin and just push it through like that, so I know. And I'm just using this as a placeholder to bake it on. So I'm gonna put several on each one, spaced out probably like that. So we're gonna put them on here first, and then we're going to add our pearlescent. I'm gonna do this one because this is a big one. So I just find it's easier to add the pearl once you have them on here, because then you can twirl them around a little bit more easier. So once you have them all on your pins like this, we're just going to use the same technique as before, where you go in with your paintbrush and just sort of dab the different colors all over them on both sides. So you just take a little bit, oops, that was a lot. And just hold it by the pin, and we'll just kind of go like this and just sort of get it on both sides. And we're trying to get a little bit of each color on each bead. And then you can just blow off any excess. That is courtesy of my daughter. She colored on my arm today. I'm just a hot mess today, guys. It's just one of those days. Yeah, so we're just gonna go until we have the whole thing. So this is time consuming for sure, but the result is so worth it. So I'll show you what this one looks like, all coated. Can't even see the sheen. There we go, you guys see it better down there. That's what I mean, so pretty. So I'm gonna do that to the rest of them, and then you just, I'm just gonna lay them flat on here to bake. Typically when I do beads, I will not do that because it will add a sort of faceted section to the beads. But in this case, because I'm trying to have them uneven anyways, it doesn't really matter. But if you were trying to have really perfect circles, usually you'd want to have these sort of suspended. So having like two pieces under here to hold this up so the bead's in the middle. So you can do that with tin foil. You can do it by kind of going on the corners of baking sheets, whatever works. But I'm not going to be doing that for these because I don't care if they have flat spots because they're not uniform shapes anyways. So once I'm done painting all these beads like this, I'm going to put them in the oven at 265 for 30 minutes, and then I will show you how I finish these up because I don't use UV resin when I'm doing pearl effect. I use something else to really seal this mica powder in. So here they are out of the oven. So now what I'm going to do is, well, with these pieces, check the edges to see if they need a little bit of sanding. But to seal them, I don't use resin for pearl pieces, just because with this texture, it's kind of difficult to work with. So instead, what I use is a varnish, which again, forgot to mention, but I'll put it down in the description. It's a gloss varnish. So this is the one I use. And I'm just gonna paint that on all of these pieces and all of these pieces just to really seal that mica powder on there so that it doesn't rub off. Like after baking, it's not really going to rub off, but I like to do it just in case. So, but before I do that, I just want to mention something about these pieces. So the backs of these pieces are not going to be pearl because we didn't put any pearl on the backs. So I just use my tissue plate to take them off like this. But let me get a piece to show you. So as you can see, the back is not pearl. So if that bothers you, so you have two options if you want both sides to be pearl. The first is when we put down that base clay sheet, you can add the pearl sort of mica powder to it and then flip it over before attaching this top ripple part. The reason I don't like to do that is because then it doesn't really stick to this very well. So it just makes it a bit harder to work with when you're cutting into it or when you're trying to lay this ripple. The other option is that you can add it after the pieces have been baked. The problem with this is that it's not going to stick as well. So all the more reason to use this to help it out. But yeah, those are your two options. If you don't care, then you can just leave it. But if it's important that it's on both sides, that's what we're gonna do. So I'm just using the same technique as before and kind of just putting them, trying to get a little bit of all of the colors on the back. Until it's nice and coated. Like that. See, now you've got it on, catching the light. Now you have it on both sides. So before I do that to all of those pieces, I'm going to seal my beads. So it's pretty easy. I'm just going to, I put some of my varnish in here. I just put it on a paintbrush and then I'm just gonna coat these fully. And then I'm going to let them dry. That's it. So you still get sort of a glossy finish to them. It seals the powder in, but you don't have to worry about the resin and drying and it being even, just like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that to all these pieces, and then I will be back to show you the final result. Here's a look at the final piece. Oh my gosh, the sun came out. Look at the colors coming off of that. That is so pretty. Here's a look at some of the beads. So as soon as you've applied the glaze on these, you can just pull them off of the pen, and then you might need to use a drill to make the hole a bit bigger. But look how pretty, look at that shine. These are now ready to be assembled into jewelry however you like. Yeah, they're just so pretty. So hopefully you guys learned a lot in this tutorial, and you'll be back again for some more in, you know, a week or so. We'll have another tutorial up ready to go. And please, if you make anything with these, like, tag me in your results. I love seeing what you have created from my tutorials. Anyways, thanks for watching. Bye.